Well, good morning from St. Bart's in Midtown Manhattan. My name is Peter Thompson. I serve as the vicar and interim rector here, and whether you're joining us in person on Park Avenue or online at stbarts.org, we are so glad that you are here for the forum, where each week we have sacred conversations about the things that matter. And this morning we are delighted to have with us the Reverend Canon Chuck Robertson, Ph.D., who serves as canon to the Presiding Bishop and Senior Advisor. Presiding Bishop Sean Rowe is the third presiding bishop you've worked for. Is that
That's
right?
exactly right. Yep. Catherine Jefferts Shorey first, and then Michael Curry.
So Canon Robertson has lots of experience in Episcopal Anglican bureaucracy, which I'm glad he will be sharing with us today. He is also a scholar and an author of many books. Your books sell well in our bookstore, so I think there are only a few copies left. But if you'd like to pick up a copy of Canon Robertson's books on your way out, just stop at the bookstore. Canon Robertson.
So my brother, my late brother, was also a writer. He wrote about psychology, Jungian psychology. And every year at the end of the year, we would call each other to find out how our royalty checks were. And I always said then, and I'll say now, if it's a good year, I get to take my wife out to dinner. If it's a great year, I get to tip the waiter. So it's, but little known fact that has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today. My cousin is also a writer. She makes a little bit more than I do in writing. She is like a multi-gazillionaire. I don't know how many zeros are at the end. Has anyone ever heard her real name is Ellie Robertson, but her pen name is Nora Roberts? Yeah. So I'm obviously writing the wrong things.
Lots of competition. Canon Robertson, we're so glad that you're here. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us.
Very much so, very much so. It is great to be back at St. Bart's. Last time I was here was when my dear friend and someone who went to seminary with me 35 years ago, Dean Wolfe, happened to be around back then. So yes, so it's been a few years since I've been here, but it is wonderful. This is a very special place. And I'm not the only one who knows that now. It appears that the people of the Smithsonian Institute know how special St. Bart's is. Does anyone? I'm seeing quizzical looks. I'm a member of the Smithsonian, and so I get their monthly magazine. And there was a story in here about the creation of Grand Central Station. I was like, oh, wow, that's great. I'll open it up. And I open it up, and what do I see but a familiar building there? Does everybody see it? Yeah. So St. Bart's is even in the Smithsonian Institute. This is impressive, very impressive. But I wanted to chat today about our Anglican DNA, and to do so by looking at Archbishops of Canterbury. I used to work for one years ago. Many years ago, I used to work for one when I was living in England and doing consulting work for George Carey. And I was fascinated by finding out something of our heritage, our DNA. All Christians, all the different parts of the body of Christ, whether it is Greek Orthodox or Pentecostal, whether it is Lutherans or Baptists, whether it's Roman Catholics or some small independent congregational church, all have their charisms, the things that make them unique within the body of Christ. And one of the things that I'm passionate about, especially having not been born into the Episcopal Church, but having found my way into it, one thing that I'm passionate about is what is our DNA? And what do we bring to the table? And how does that play out in real life amidst all the conflicts and struggles that we have internally and all around us? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And by the way, for me, I know I'm a Floridian, so I'm used to heat, but this is a little warm, so I'm going to take this off. My apologies, but I'm going to take that off. You will see the wires and all that, but that's okay. So let me just walk us through a little bit. From Augustine to Sarah Mullally, first of all, I hope everyone knows both names, but especially the second name, because in just 2 months' time, she is going to become the first woman. She will become the first woman to hold the chair of Augustine as the 106th Archbishop of Canterbury. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. But first, where do we begin? To be honest, I teach courses on our Anglican DNA, and I usually decide in a course where we have lots of time, I usually say, well, if we really want to say where does our story begin, it goes back to Jesus and the apostles. And it goes back to the Acts of the Apostles, and it goes back to a tale of two cities, Jerusalem on the one hand and Antioch on the other. Love to come back and talk about that sometime. Peter, take note, please. Bring back any time for that. Because I am, as a Pauline scholar, I am passionate about the New Testament and the way that forms us. But because we don't have time, our story will begin 5 centuries after that with this guy, Augustine of Canterbury. Augustine was a wonderful, studious scholar monk. Best way to put it. This is someone who lived his life with books and learning and teaching and educating. He was part of a monastic tradition. And in fact, the person who had paid for and kind of was the patron of his particular place where he was abbot at that point was none other than someone named Gregory, who would indeed found 7 different monasteries, who had a deep love of the monastic life, but who also was an incredibly savvy politician, administrator, and was tapped by the people to become Bishop of Rome. We know him better as Gregory the Great, Gregory the First, Pope, who had also a love of mission. So besides being an administrator, besides being a monastic at heart, Gregory had a love for mission. And it is here we see something that we often forget to claim as Anglicans, as Episcopalians. The very first great missionary work, the first great missionary initiative was sent by Gregory the Great when he sent the scholar monk and a team with him out in 596 to go and, as he said, evangelize the land of the angels. Now, there's wonderful traditions about why he sent them to Britain, the farthest most point of what had once been the Roman Empire. There's one legend that says he saw a group of fair-skinned slaves at the market in Rome and asked who and what they were, and someone said, oh, they are angels. And he said, they are angels. I can see that. Just a good legend. The fact of the matter is he knew of some things that had been happening there in times past, and he wanted to do a major evangelistic mission to that place. 596, he sends out Augustine. Now you may say, wait a second, I thought it said 597. That's right, and I love this. This is so Anglican and so human, because as Augustine goes in obedience, as he bears forth and says, we're going to go, we're going to evangelize this people, we're going to do what we were called to do. He gets into France. The bishops there say, well, who are you? I was sent by Gregory, Bishop of Rome. Could you show us your papers? Times have not changed, folks. He did not have a visa on him. His passport was not showing up. And the bishops of Gaul, the Frankish bishops, said, not going to let you pass. So the great missionary initiative of 596 ends up becoming the missionary initiative of 597 because of administrative reasons. He and the group had to go back and get the papers from Gregory. I love that, don't you? That is so us. He does go and get them. He finally makes his way there to what we would now call Kent in the southeast part of England. Makes his way, meets the king, the local chieftain, the king, Ethelbert, and he says, I've come to bring you good news of something you don't even know about Jesus. And he said, oh, let me introduce you to my wife. She's a Christian. Queen Bertha is a Christian. She has a chaplain. Christianity had been in Britain for a long time. In fact, if you know your good Arthurian legends, you know, the sword and the stone and everything, if you know your good Arthurian legends, folks say that Joseph of Arimathea, the one who gave his tomb for Jesus, that he had gone to England or what would be England, and had taken the gospel with him. Whatever the origins, whatever the truth, we know that around the time that we got the Nicene Creed, we know that around that time in the 300s, that somehow there were already people there who were followers of Jesus. Much of that came out of the Celtic tradition from the north, and some of it, especially for the Queen, came from, guess where? The French. And so Augustine gets there full of readiness. Let's do it. Let's evangelize. Oh, wait a second, they already have Christians here. But then as he listened to them, he said, oh, but they're the wrong kind. They don't do things the way we do. Boy, would that be a familiar refrain through the ages, right? Yeah, they don't do things the way we do. Just a little aside, forgive me, a little aside. My first ecumenical experience, I spent my life in ecumenical and communion work. So in fact, I'll be at Bishop Sarah's installation in March as the new Archbishop of Canterbury, and then I'll be at the Vatican in April. But I grew up Roman Catholic dad, Southern Baptist mom, went to church in Roman Catholic Church, and my first girlfriend at the age of 15, my first girlfriend was a Pentecostal, a full-blown Pentecostal. And so, any Pentecostals here? Love it, former. I had an interesting time as I brought her to my church on a Saturday night to our Mass and said, hey, why don't we see what each other's churches are like? And she walked away saying, how come everybody knew the lines? And I said, your church is not like that? And she's like, no, we're much more freed up. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And the next day I went and I experienced for the first time seeing someone next to me slain in the Spirit. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Slain in the Spirit, down for the count, and I started screaming, the person's dead. She's dead. So again, I get what Augustine was saying. This isn't the kind of Christianity I know. So what's he do? He decides to write back. Write home to his boss. Boss, here's the problem. And he writes a series of questions, all kinds of things. Very mundane, administrative, liturgical, very specific questions. But one question in this series of questions that we still have all these with us, one question is particularly important. If the faith is one and the same, why then are there different customs in different churches? This was one of the set of questions that would get responses from Gregory. It became known as the Libellus Responsionum. And we have this, and it's wonderful and easy now to see one reason why he is called Gregory the Great. He responds by saying this, you know, my brother, the custom of the Roman Church in which you were trained. If you have found anything in either the Roman or Gallican or any other church which may be more acceptable to Almighty God, I am willing that you carefully make choice of the same and diligently teach the English church, which is as yet new in the faith, whatever you gather from the several churches. Let's put that real short. You know what you are used to. Embrace it. Honor that. But also see what else is out there and take the best, leave the rest, but take the best of what you see out there and run with it and help bring these things together, what you know and what you see there. This is the opposite of extremism. This is the opposite of bias. This is the opposite of saying my way or the highway. This is a way that takes harder work, takes a lot more work. To say, I don't understand, but I think I could learn something. And maybe the same will be true for you. This is going to take work and the grace and power of the Holy Spirit. By the way, this wonderful photo that I have is from the 50th anniversary of Anglican Roman Catholic relations, formal relations. And I love, as you see, the late Pope Francis and the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. He is holding up the top of the crozier that was Augustine's. It's a replica, a perfect replica of the original crozier that was given as a gift to him, to the Church of England and to the Anglican Communion from the Pope. But look at what he's saying. You know what you bring. Learn from the other and see how these things could fit. So let's jump in our time travel machine. Fast forward 900 years. Now, anyone spend any time in London? If you did you ever make it to the National Portrait Gallery? Not the National Gallery, but the National... one of my favorite places in all. It's right up from St. Martin's. It's right up from Trafalgar Square, St. Martin's and Fields. You're going up towards Leicester Square. You're going to see all the theaters of the West End. And just on the corner, there it is on the left, as you're going up. And as you do, you can go in, and they have a Tudor wing with Henry and all the folks around Henry and Elizabeth and everyone, including this portrait. Thomas Cranmer. Thomas Cranmer, who was no saint himself, none of these folks, they're human. They're like us. Thomas was someone who was negotiating political realities, tried to save his own skin sometimes, but intensely thinking through what he knew and what new things were happening. So while you had, on the one hand, Luther, Martin Luther, who is such a fun character to read, absolutely, again, none of these saints in the way we think of this pure, unvarnished, no, as human as you get. And you have Luther, I love it, Luther standing up at the Diet of Worms after he has done his thesis, after he has made the break, as he is standing there, and they say, renounce, retract, recant. And he says, here I stand, I can do no other. And then he jumps on the back of a hay truck, throws it on him, and whisks off to Wartburg Castle, where he grows a beard and long hair and wears different clothes and becomes known as a man named Junker George. Here I stand. Is my getaway car ready? I love that. Cranmer is the opposite. Cranmer comes, and they say when Mary becomes queen, the one for whom we get a very famous breakfast drink, when Mary becomes queen and wants to bring everything back to Rome and get rid of all these things that Cranmer had done with the Book of Common Prayer and with the changes to liturgy, wants to get rid of all that, he is called on the carpet. And he is told, all right, Cranmer, we're going to torture you. No, I'll sign anything. Give it to me, I'll sign it. He signs this recantation that they had already written out for him. Very human. But here's what I love. When it comes time for him to be burned at the stake, and they lead him there, and they say, you know what, we're going to let you publicly recant, just like you did with signing that statement, just to help the other people so they don't end up like you do. And this fearful, anxious, scholarly person gets up and says, I recant my recantations. And because this hand hath erred in signing that document, let this hand be the first part of me to be burned. Again, I cannot impress enough. We are so human. And we are blessed with the strength we need at times to do what is needed. And all of that came because he refused to do one extreme, and at the same time, he didn't want to do the other extreme, because you had other folks who came after Luther who said, we're throwing out all of it. Bishops, priests, collars, candles, all that stuff. We're tossing it all out. And in fact, we won't even recognize when people are baptized as infants. Instead, we're going to re-baptize them. They became known as the Anabaptists. We will re-baptize you. And Cranmer saw all of this. He saw what he thought was a corrupt Roman church at that point, and he saw the corruptions of the other side. He saw two extremes. And while he may not have thought about it in these terms, he said, why don't we take the best of what we know and the best of what we're hearing from Luther and others on the continent and see how we can make this work. very much in the spirit of Gregory and Augustine. Another incredibly good-looking gentleman there, Richard Hooker, who came along and authored an incredible 8-volume set called On the Laws of Ecclesiastical Polity. It did not sell as well as my cousin Nora's books. It sold more like mine. But he, as his biographer said, translated many of the confusing and destructive conflicts into a pragmatic and tolerant middle way. We actually have that in Latin. What do we call it? The via media. And this via media, think about it. People will say, well, isn't that just easy compromise? There is nothing easy about what we're talking about here in Anglican DNA. It is much easier to join an echo chamber. Much easier to say, I'm going to be with this group, and we all think alike, and we're all going to reinforce each other's opinions, and we're going to listen to the same news, and we're going to get the same magazines, and we are going to absolutely reinforce each other. That is so much easier than to say, I totally disagree with you. Now let's pray. On the continent, this became the age of religious wars in the name of Christ. Now, we had already perfected all that. Our Christian track record for things like wars, pretty poor. You know, in the 1200s, you have, the Crusades, and then someone said, well, that's not good enough. Not good enough to kill the infidel outside. I think we got a bunch of heretics inside. So let's do an Inquisition. Let's have Crusades and an Inquisition. That's a great idea. It was the church at its worst. And yet even then, God raises up a crazy guy in Italy named Francesco, who was from Assisi, and starts a movement that really tries to bring everyone in. Hooker, a pragmatic and tolerant middle way. It is hard work. My uncle served in World War II, was the second most highly decorated U.S. soldier of World War II after Audie Murphy, who many may know. My uncle used that, like others who were war heroes, to go into Congress. And his congressional class included a naval war hero named Jack Kennedy, and also another naval vet named Dick Nixon. All the same congressional class. My uncle went on to serve 34 years in the U.S. Congress. His best friend was across the aisle from him. And he used to tell me when I was a child growing up, he said, Chuck, remember, we argue, yell, and debate during the day, and then at night we go to Clyde's of Georgetown and get a steak. This is something of Anglicanism in it. This idea that says, while others said sign on the dotted line, Cranmer gave us a book of common agreement? No, a book of common prayer. Hooker then kind of helped think through this even more and said, the way we do this is by realizing that we honor the tradition that comes with our scriptures. We honor the tradition and we bring in reason. So like Gregory said to Augustine, take what you know and also listen, learn, see, experience, and try to bring this stuff together. Again, hard work, grace-needed work. Jump back into our time machine. 100 years later, 3,000 miles away, namely here, the American colonies. Who were our bishops in those earliest years? Well, we didn't have any. Our bishop was the Bishop of London. During the colonial years, the Bishop of London was overseer of all the Anglican churches in what were the colonies here in America. But that person sent commissaries, ambassadors, emissaries, who helped to say, how do you run things and how do you do things when you don't have a house of bishops and you don't have everything that we have in the mother country? How then do you work this? And so what did they do? They came up with innovations. They said, well, let's empower the laity more because, to be honest, we don't quite have enough priests going around. And we don't know who they're going to report to, so we're going to start creating vestries. And they're going to be elected. And we're going to have clergy meeting together in convocations. All this stuff that we now take for granted was born not in the Church of England, but in the church in the colonies. A way of saying, this is our version of Augustine coming and saying, oh, they've got this. How do we work this? And working it in such a way that we could figure out how it would take root in this soil and look a little different than it did in the mother country. That distance from the king and from the bishops, things like more power to the laity, the clergy convocations and training, and one added thing, annual conventions, colonial conventions, a convention of the church in Pennsylvania or in Virginia. As they did these and then eventually said, what if we had one convention? Here's another face that may not be familiar, but this was the chaplain to the Continental Congress and later to the Constitutional Convention. This is a guy who hung out with figures like Adams and Jefferson and Rush and all those other names we know so well, who listened and watched and said, what is going on? How does a people form a new thing? When in the course of human events, as Jefferson would write. Later, it would be in our preface in our prayer book, when in the course of divine providence, these states became independent, then their ecclesiastical independence was also needed. William White would go on to become Bishop of Pennsylvania, one of the first bishops in this church. And more than that, he would go on to become the first bishop with seniority, which meant he became the first presiding bishop over this general convention of all the now states that were part of this thing that he said, we can't really call it the Church of England. We got to call it something else. Like Cranmer before him, he said, we're keeping bishops. We will be bishop-led, and thus we will be Episcopal. Taking the name from our Scottish, our other mother church. That's why the Episcopal flag has the Scottish and English flags or symbols as part of the flag. We took from the Scots, who gave us Samuel Seabury, the first bishop in the church. They also gave us that chance to use that name. We will be a church of bishops and priests, deacons, laity. But we are going to take the best of what we bring and do it in a new way in this new place. So William White helps us and others like him to find a way forward into this new reality. Which is why when people talk about, oh my goodness, we are declining, we're a declining church. How many people have heard the word decline? Yeah. All faith groups are in decline and have been. We actually have leveled out. I don't know if you heard about that. Last couple of years, we actually have had slight increases. But I always ask people, wait, decline from when? What's your starting point? 1950s? Oh, okay. No, not fair. That's like the bubble, it's like the housing bubble in 2000s, early 2000s. No, that was the church bubble, the 1950s, the post-World War II, GIs are home, everyone's having babies, we're going to have churches all over the place. It was the highlight of the mainline church time. And as a result, it was a golden age for some. I always say, how about women who wanted to be in leadership? Golden age? How about persons of color who wanted to even be a part of our church? How about persons who were LGBT? So golden ages are funny things. If we really want to say, are we in decline, let's talk about going all the way back to William White. And what will we find? We will find that in William White's time, we were the smallest denomination in America because we were the Church of England, now having to be something new. If we skip back over to the Church of England, 100 years later, we find this figure, Charles Longley, Archbishop of Canterbury, who is asked by people in America and in Canada to hold a gathering of bishops from throughout the world. See, once we split and became our own thing, in many ways we created something new, a possibility, a network. And he said, I will bring you together, not to say who's in and who's out, not to say what's true and what's wrong, not to say you're right and you've got it completely off, but to pray together, to get to know each other, to at times debate, but more likely to listen. He created what would be the first gathering in his home in Lambeth Palace. It would become known as the Lambeth Conference of Bishops. Starting in 1867, and every 10 years or so after that, it would be replicated. Not saying who's in and who's out, but something new. Not the Roman Catholic Church with a pope, but rather we found a network, a gathering, a united churches in which they don't make binding resolutions, and they don't just include the Church of England's colonial churches, but also members from the church in Scotland and the Episcopal Church in the United States. Some bishops said, want nothing to do with it. But again, Longley, like White, like Hooker, like Cranmer, like Gregory told Augustine, said, can't we make enough space for us to come together? The Archbishop of York at the time wouldn't show up. But 10 years later, when there was a new Archbishop of Canterbury, and the next one, Archbishop Tate, reconvened and did this again, then suddenly everyone showed up and said, let's see where this goes. And so it went year after year, decade after decade, until now. Almost 50 years after the 1978 Lambeth Conference, when women were first recognized that they could even be ordained, and 40 years since Barbara Harris of Massachusetts became the first woman to be a bishop, now the Right Reverend Dame Sarah Mullally stands ready to walk in Augustine of Canterbury's footsteps. She comes, and having spent time with her at various times in the past few years, she comes as someone who wants to negotiate, someone who wants to listen, someone who wants to find a way forward without being my way or the highway. When she became Bishop of London, 20% of the congregations in her place, in her diocese, did not recognize the ordination of women over them. 20%. She told them, I am very respectful of those who for theological reasons cannot accept my role as priest or bishop. My belief is that church diversity should flourish and grow, and everybody should be able to find a spiritual home. No one actually knows her specific viewpoint on the other issues of our time, but she led brilliantly and very difficult the first conversations that were known as LLF, Living in Love and Faith, questions about looking at marriage equality in the Church of England, took heat from both sides as she tried to find a space for folks to be able to talk through this. So the next Archbishop of Canterbury is going to have quite a job on her hands when she comes in. Not only having to deal with what she's already dealt with, being the first woman in that role, and having served under Catherine Jefferts Schori, I will tell you, I used to keep a red file in my file cabinet. A red file that was about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch thick, and at times it got a little thicker, of letters that I did not show my boss. And they were pretty awful, including one that we actually had to call the authorities on because it was one of those where someone cut out letters and glued them on the paper and said, you know, you are, and it was pretty awful. It was a credible death threat. So we actually had to call on that. Bishop Sarah has faced and will face all kinds of issues. At this time, we have groups like GAFCON, groups like the Anglican Church in North America, groups like, there's a whole alphabet soup of groups who, for one reason or another, are opposed to her even being in this role, who are opposed to us and have been for years. And the question is how we move forward together And when she comes on board in March, we will continue to see what next steps are made. Let me stop there and take any questions. How much time do we have left? Any?
We have 10-15 minutes for questions. If you're here in the room, Stephanie Terrell will come around with question cards. Just raise your hand, and she'll bring one to you, and then she'll bring them up to us. If you're joining us online, you can type your questions into the live chat on YouTube, the comments on Facebook, or you can email me, pthompson@stbarts.org.
So how do you want to do it?
I'll start off with one as we're collecting the questions.
Okay.
And it occurred to me as you were going through your presentation, Chuck, that you were acknowledging all along the way the political realities of being the body of Christ. And as someone who has studied this but also lived that, I wonder if you can reflect on the fact that religion is political.
Oh, absolutely. We are called to be nonpartisan for the very reasons that Gregory gave to Augustine. We are absolutely political when you think about it. Politics is being human and trying to figure out how you live together. And so from the beginning, we found that it's fascinating. In the Gospels, there's two different versions of a similar story that are wildly different in how they come out. One has Jesus saying, "Those who are not with me are against me." The other older tradition says, "Those who are not against me are with me." Which way you choose to go, they're both in the Bible. Where your starting point is might determine where you go. And so that is why, Augustine, what he said to Gregory, who doesn't see that makes sense? They're the wrong kind. Why do they do it this way? Why do they think this? Why is he in that political party? Why is he in this church position? And it is so much easier to just listen to those. So a few years ago, some very practical realities of this. Certain parts of our church, where I first was ordained a priest, long before 2003, literally a decade or so before Gene Robinson of New Hampshire was even known to anyone, my diocese was already going through this. And I remember as I came in, I remember hearing people say horrible things about each other. And then when you have folks who help reinforce that, yeah, they really are awful, those people, then it was awful. It was so bad in my diocese, so bad that finally I, 3 years into my ordained ministry, I tried to renounce my vows because I didn't have my vows to me at that point, I didn't grow up in the Episcopal Church. This wasn't like something too precious to me. I was like, look, I came in thinking we'd make a difference. This is awful. And the canon to the ordinary at the time grabbed me on the way to see the bishop for my appointment. And he said he had canceled my appointment. I said, "You can't do that, Ernie." He said, "I can," and I did. "Let's go get lunch. I'm hungry." And I said, "I'm not hungry." He said, "Well, I am, so get in the car." And as he ate, and I, in my righteous anger, just spewed out everything and all my anger, notice how easy it is to fall in the very trap, only on the other side, I was falling into the same kind of thing, only from the other side. And Ernie finally, after I had kind of exhausted myself and was panting after my huge outpouring, Ernie stopped, looked at me, and put a finger up and said, "Be part of the solution." And then the question then becomes, well, how? And that's what I asked. And he said, "Now that is the right question." That is what Augustine was being told. That is what I believe is part of our Anglican DNA. Do you know, whatever one's politics, and I don't know if you realize, the birth of things, when there are attempts for people to speak together, like, say, for instance, the United Nations when it was born, it is probably not a coincidence that FDR and Eleanor Roosevelt were both faithful Episcopalians, and he was a member of his vestry. There is something we have that whatever one's Republican, as my old boss used to say, Michael Curry, I don't care if you're red or blue, but if you're for Jesus, you're going to be about love. And if it's not about love, it's not about God. That's a very different way of thinking than inquisitions and crusades.
You talked about our history with the American Revolution. Why should we as American Episcopalians care about the Archbishop of Canterbury?
Excellent question. And I get asked that by folks in very real ways. At one point, I've had folks in leadership in the church who have asked at times, should we stop funding and keep stuff at home? And I always say, okay, sure, that's a lot easier. Again, easier. And then what happens, we end up, it's funny, when you become sectarian, odds are then you're going to find ways to be upset with each other within the sectarian thing, and you have to start another sect, right? So the fact is, this grand experiment we have, that really I look at Longley, and when I'm walking down the halls of Lambeth Palace, and there's the Rogues Gallery, all the previous, the portraits of the previous archbishops. As I'm walking down for whatever meeting I'm at, I'll be doing this in a couple months. When I walk down, I stop at Longley's portrait and I just give a little bow. He was not heroic in other ways, but there were folks who said, call a synod and tell everyone, who's in and who's out, because there was a controversy going on at that time in Southern Africa. And most importantly, don't invite the Scots or the Yanks, because they're not part of our system anymore. And he said no to both. He was a quiet guy who, again, found the bravery he needed. So to me, why does this matter? Because we show the world a different way. It's like I and you can disagree. We can disagree with other parts of the church. The Church of Nigeria officially does not recognize being in communion with us, with who we are as the Episcopal Church. But guess what? We are going to keep praying for the Church of Nigeria. It's all about which choices we make, the easy way or the really hard way of just being able to show the world a different way of living.
You have had a long career in the Episcopal Church and the Anglican Communion. What do you expect for Bishop Sarah in her new role? And you do know her, so if she asked for your advice, what would you tell her?
First of all, let me say this about Sarah, about Bishop Sarah. When I was with her last, a couple of months ago, she said at the end, she said, and I couldn't believe I was hearing this, she said, Chuck, listen, if you see me make any missteps, give me a call and let me know so I can learn about that. I was like, yeah, like I'm ever going to, Archbishop of Canterbury, you're making a misstep. But the humility of that, and it was genuine, the genuine humility of that was extraordinary. She's going to face folks who are going to make demands, and it's going to come from both sides, or all sides, however many sides there are. It is an impossible job in many ways. But I think that what she is going to do is I think she's going to bring that savvy she has as the former chief nurse of Britain, as someone who knows the way that she's a dame for a reason. She knows and is savvy enough to know how to negotiate and navigate the waters. I think that that's going to be called for, and I think it's going to be very difficult. And I think that those of us who believe in this thing that we do of having difference yet coming together, I think we're going to have to support it every way we can. Our own presiding bishop, Sean Rowe, when she was elected, said, I want to do what I can to help support. And we are grateful that we do that in so many ways, whether it's through the amazing work of Episcopal Relief and Development, whether it's through our church office from the Presiding Bishop's office. We will need to do that, no question.
What should Episcopalians know about the Church of England that they don't already?
That it is very, very different than ours. And their polity, their way of governance, everything is very different. But it is also that faithful expression of the Anglican DNA and the love of God and the gospel of Jesus in their soil. The same plant you'll see adaptations of varieties planted in other soil over time. Ours is taking a different place. Our way is different. It will look different. Again, it's like like he said back in 597, the Roman way, the Gallican way may be different, the English way may be different. The Scottish Episcopal Church is way different than the English Church. And so is all the other churches that I've had the pleasure and privilege to be able to visit. It's different, but that's okay. And again, she's not our Pope. She is first among equals. And so together, our primate and other primates meeting with her, our leaders and other leaders meeting together. In fact, we are now starting to embark on a thing where we are going to really get serious about meeting as a region, the primates of the Americas and leaders of the Americas under the auspices of the primate of the Americas, who was elected to that regional role, Marinés Bassato of Brazil, who has asked if we can find ways to have regular conversations. That's what this is all about. Regular conversations, not agreement, but common prayer, and finding out where God might be working with us and what I can learn from the other.
Someone wonders if ACNA, the Anglican Church in North America, if they recognize the Archbishop of Canterbury.
So the moment that she was selected, within a week, I believe, I might be wrong, but I think it was like within 5 days or 7 days at the most, GAFCON, again, another one of the acronyms, the group that is based mostly in the global south, but of which the Anglican Church in North America is a leader in it. Gotta love that. For those who talk about colonialism, post-colonialism, we could really get into what's that about. They immediately, the Archbishop of Rwanda, who heads up that particular group, immediately said, we do not recognize and will not recognize her authority because of her position on sexuality, which is interesting given that, as I said, she's actually not made that absolutely known and clear, but she did head up the work to have everyone from the different viewpoints of the Church of England talk about it. So what's fascinating is, yes, will the members of the Anglican Church in North America continue to not recognize? Most likely, they did not make that statement. Again, it was made by the Archbishop of Rwanda. Immediately, many of the churches in Africa and other parts of the global south who are nominally part of GAFCON, they went silent, said, we didn't say that. And I happen to have a quiet meaning, below the radar meeting with one of those who was visiting Florida at the time, with one archbishop in Africa, I won't say which one, who said to me, I totally disagree with where you all are at in certain things, but I don't want to lose the relationship. And I certainly do not want to lose the relationship with the Archbishop of Canterbury. January 2015, the last year of Presiding Bishop Catherine Jefferts Shorey's term, before Michael Curry came in, 5 archbishops from Africa, 5 archbishops on their initiative came to New York to meet with Bishop Catherine. And as I sat in the room and listened, the first one opened by saying these words. I'll never forget it because this is verbatim. But he said, we are tired of being bullied by some of our fellow primates on the continent into not being in a relationship with you. We don't agree with you about certain matters. We don't even understand your stance on these matters. But we need each other if we're going to live out the gospel of Christ. And from that, the rest of that day was spent talking about ways that we could work together on different areas that we have been doing for the past few years since 2015. That's extraordinary. This is not easy work, but that's extraordinary. We do not agree with you, but we will not be bullied into not being in a relationship with you. That's extraordinary. And again, shows the world a different way. That's why I believe in this DNA of ours.
Final question before we end. When does Bishop Sarah become Archbishop of Canterbury, and what is left before she officially has that title?
So any day, well, first of all, any day now she will be Archbishop of Canterbury. I'm trying to think if it actually happened this past week or not, or if it's coming up. No, it's coming up. It's coming up. There will be, it's wonderfully, again, Church of England, Church, anything in America, we're always kind of looking forward. England always kind of celebrating that incredibly rich history, of which ours is just a fraction of it, right? And so there's a 1,000-year-old tradition that says she is not Archbishop of Canterbury yet until she is elected by the dean and clergy. I don't think it's chapter. The dean and clergy of Canterbury, and so they are getting ready to do that. I think it's happening in the next few weeks. And when that happens, she will no longer be Archbishop of Canterbury designate. She will be Archbishop of Canterbury. Then we actually have the service at the end of March to install her formally in the role in which she's already working out of Lambeth Palace, but she's also been Bishop of London and trying to kind of close that work out as well. So it's been quite a transition time for her.
So unfortunately, we have to stop there. Please join me in thanking the Reverend Dr. Canon Chuck Robertson.
Thank you all. Thank you here at St. Bart's. You all are an extraordinary congregation. And I got to tell you, it is always a privilege and pleasure to be here. But keep doing what you do. Keep showing the love of Jesus in the ways that are not always easy. Keep being a presence here in New York City in a way that shows the world a different way. Thank you for all you do. I'll see you all in church.
Thank you again. And a reminder that Canon Robertson's books are available in the bookstore. We do hope you'll stick around and join us for church at 11 a.m., either in person or online.
Let's see if my royalties can get to be at the stage that my cousins are at.